Hey everybody, welcome to From My Heart to Yours. I'm Helen Hillix, your host, and I'm really excited today to talk about crossing the bridge to your partner. I was just listening to a TEDx talk by a woman named Hedy Schleifer, and she is so brilliant, and I've heard this many other places too, but she inspired me to do this podcast and YouTube video about crossing the bridge to your partner. And the basic concept is that the ego has hijacked our relationships, all of them, and made us feel like we are separate from one another instead of really the deep, deep connection that we have. And I want to talk about how painful that is, when something happens and we get self-protective and we get defensive and we feel separate from one another. And she was talking about the philosopher Martin Buber and how he described, a long time ago that the relationship actually exists in the space between you. The relationship doesn't exist within me or within that other person. The relationship exists in the space between us, and that is sacred space. And another thing that I love, the idea that whether we're talking about a romantic sexual relationship between me and another person, or we're talking about a nation relating to another nation, it really is exactly the same dynamic, is that it's about crossing the bridge to that other entity, that other collective, that other person, whatever it is. And she also referenced Rumi, who said, beyond right thinking and beyond wrong thinking, there is a field. I will meet you there. And that just makes me just about cry, just reading it. Beyond right thinking and beyond wrong thinking, there is a field. I will meet you there. And that just says it all in a very powerful way. But I want to offer you the 7-step process that I use for crossing the bridge to your partner. And again, you can use this at work and you can use this at home with your lover. You can use this anywhere. Because first thing we do is we connect. And that is a very powerful step all by itself. And I use this every single tool that I have, because taking a deep breath, putting your feet on the ground, sitting up straight, centering your energy is an amazingly important step, and will shift the energy immediately because it reminds you that you're part of the oneness. It reminds you that you're not alone in this process. So number 1 is always to connect. Connect to yourself, connect to the universe or God, however you think of that divine energy, and connect to one another. So start by that connection process. Then the second is be neutral. And this is an incredibly important step. In being able to create a sacred space between the two of you. What we usually do is we contaminate that sacred space with judgments, feelings of rejection, feelings of anger, resentments, criticisms. It all flows into that sacred space between you. And then what happens? Then you're not connected. And again, I don't care whether this is at work or at home, whether it's a child or a lover. It's that sacred space between us. If we aren't careful and conscious about it, it becomes terribly contaminated and then destroys the connection. So being neutral is like giving up those opinions. That's another thing that gets into that sacred space and really contaminates it. It's a bunch of opinions. You should be thinner. You should work harder. You should touch me differently, whatever it is. Those are all opinions that get held in that sacred space. So it's really important for the second step to be neutral, to leave those opinions, to leave those judgments, feelings of rejection, And of course, all of this really is about the ego hijacking our relationships, because those are all self-protective and blaming experiences, the rejection, the criticism, the judgments, the self-protection. Those are all ego-based because they're all about me and what you've done to me, or what you didn't do for me, or whatever it is. So when we get neutral, we are allowing ourselves to go beyond the ego domination. We're allowing ourselves to connect to the oneness, back to step one, and we're allowing ourselves to just be open-hearted and open-minded. So important, and so often we don't do that. So I want to encourage you to really be mindful of that second step, to be neutral. And the third step, again, is a very common step in all the tools that I offer, is to intend. Be clear about what you are intending, because it brings power to this experience, and it brings clarity and focus to the experience. And so the intention is to leave that ego domination behind and cross the bridge to connect. That's the intention, is to cross the bridge to connect. In order to do that, we have to do steps 1 and 2. So step 3 can only be done after you do the first couple of steps, and that is to cross that bridge. Step 4 is to, once you are across that bridge, metaphorically speaking, of course, and you are in the space of the other person, now what do you do? Well, it's a very simple process, but hard to do sometimes, is to listen. Really listen to the other person. Reflect back. You know, I hear you saying that you're angry at me because I don't tell you where I'm going sometimes. Tell me more about that. So you listen, you reflect, you explore with that other person. You be in the space, the emotional space of that other person. And especially with a lover, this is unbelievably powerful, because what happens when you do that? I know that you intuitively know the answer to that question. What happens when you do that is that other person feels heard, they feel affirmed, they feel validated, they feel cared about. So when you get over to the other side, be very mindful about listening and reflecting and connecting deeply with an open heart and an open mind, and leave all of your judgments and opinions back on the other side of the bridge. You know, be very mindful not to reply in a way that is related to your ego and making it about you in any way. This is all about connecting to that person where they are. And then observe what happens. That's step 5, is observe what happens. Notice the distance evaporating. Notice that other person not being defensive or accusatory. Notice how the energy is clarifying and neutralizing. Notice how that sacred space feels sacred again. Just notice that. And the 6th step is to evolve through practice. You will get better and better at crossing that bridge. You will get better and better at listening to that person with an open heart and an open mind. And as you are able to cross that bridge over to the other person's space, to the other person's experience, you will be developing that sacred space between you. You will be decontaminating that sacred space between you, because you will notice that you live more and more in the ability to let go of that ego domination, to let go of your own self-protection, to let go of the feelings of rejection or blame or the opinions that they should be more this or that. You know, I have a tool, I think about this too, I don't remember, but it's about how being right is a lonely game. And you can live in that space in your relationship of being right. And you can absolutely defend it, and you can justify it. You can prove it over and over and over again. You can prove that your partner is deficient in this or that way. Absolutely, you can do that. And you know where it will lead because you've already done it. So in this stage, the step of evolve through practice, it's like remind yourself over and over again that when you contaminate that space between you, you are creating distance between you and that beloved person. And I also, one of the things that Hedy said was that's where our children live, is in that space between us. And that really, I mean, that is so true. And that's something I've espoused for decades, is that in the energy field that you're creating, that's where your kids are raised. They're raised in that energy field. So it's a further encouragement to all of us to keep that space as clean and loving and conscious as we can, because it affects everyone around us. And this is I understand that this is a huge challenge. I am not naive. You know, I've been in this business 35 years. I've seen every kind of relationship. And of course, I've experienced my own challenges, which I'm very transparent about. And this is a huge challenge to all of us, because we have all learned to be ego dominated, and so is our culture. Our culture, our nation is the same way. It's like we are right and the other nation is wrong. And of course, what does that lead to? Wars and conflicts all over the world. So this is not just something that happens between you and your lover. This is something that happens all over the world all the time. But you know what? We can change the world by changing our own family, by changing our own marriage, by changing our own love relationship and our own relationship with our boss or our coworkers. And through practice, through the willingness to say to the ego, I'm not going to be dominated by you today. I'm going to cross the bridge. And it really touches me, that metaphor of crossing the bridge. And it's such an inspiration, you know, that divide between us, again, whether it's a lover or a country. Let's cross that divide between us by practicing this tool over and over again of connecting, being neutral, intending to leave the ego domination behind and really understand that other person or that other group, and be open, listen, reflect, connect, and see what happens. And then practice this over and over and over again until it becomes second nature. And then what happens, guys, is you do evolve. You do evolve in your very core, and then you can enjoy the amazing closeness that comes from keeping that space between you and the other person sacred, by keeping it cleaned up. And when you notice there's something in the space, and there may not even be a current conflict, but you just notice an energy in that space, you notice a feeling of separation, take out this tool of crossing the bridge to your partner and use these 7 steps. Be conscious of any contamination that happens in that space, that sacred space between you, and be dedicated to cleaning it up. So that's it for today, guys. The 7 steps to crossing the bridge to your partner, to cleaning up the sacred space between you. And as always, I love all of you. I'm so honored to be able to offer this tool, and I hope you will use it. I hope you will benefit from it, and I hope you'll let me know. Contact me anytime at helen@helenhillix.com, and you can find me on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter really. I don't really use that. Instagram, Facebook, those are my things. And here you go. Use this and be blessed. Love you guys.